Good morning and welcome to another meditation on hope. Today I want to talk about hope which enables us to work for the future. I think that's a large part of living hopefully, is working for the future, not just for the moment. Many years ago, I remember sitting in the garden of an elderly Anglican bishop in Maiduguri, who is no longer with us. And we were discussing a lot of things. We ended up talking about why it was that Christians in Nigeria seemed to have very little effect on their society. They seemed to be as reckless or careless about life in many ways as their neighbours who might be animists or Muslims or atheists. You had on the one hand millions and millions of people who considered themselves born again Christians, but almost no effect on society. He was very concerned about this. He felt that Christians were stuck in short-term thinking. They didn't think about the longer term. They didn't think about improving their lives and other people's lives, or indeed in terms of the politics of the country either. It was a lack of interest in the future he was talking about. Now, a lot of our discussion was about gardening. He was very keen on getting people to rescue the folklore of which herbs in their environment were good for healing things, and also which trees were good for fruit and for shade and for providing building timber down the line. And better use of water and farming techniques. He was a very practical man. But I remember that it was something we were interested in was why don't Christians in Nigeria build for the future more than we would expect? And one of the things we did put our finger on was this teaching about the rapture and the coming great 7-year tribulation, which is not exactly encouraging anyone to build for the long term. In fact, you'd wonder why anyone would have children if you really believed that stuff. Now, it seems to me that a Christian is somebody who certainly does enjoy the moment. We live in the present. But while we live in the present and enjoy walking in the Spirit and having fellowship with God, the things we do should be and are aimed at the future. Sometimes, just to wind people up, I say I don't think Jesus is going to come back for a few thousand years. And many Christians find that quite unsettling. They're used to the idea that if you are spiritually minded, you're expecting Jesus to turn up soon. Well, in my understanding of the revelation, it's preparing us for the long haul. It's telling us to be ready for a long struggle. The Great Tribulation doesn't last 7 years. It's lasted 2,000 years so far, and it could last another 10,000 or 20,000 years. We really don't know. But the trouble is that Christians who are always expecting either imminent disaster or the imminent return of Jesus, in both cases, tend not to think very deeply about what they're doing in the long term. Now, whatever God has given you to do, a lot of it is temporary and it's of value in the moment. Everything is beautiful in its time. But I do think that we should be people who have an eye to the well-being of generations after us, a thought for the future. And I want to offer you something which is a bit unformed in my mind, but which is beginning to really interest me. And that is that the Christian hope of resurrection is much more than just me existing in the future. It's much more than me and the people I love existing in the future. Resurrection seems to include God resurrecting a lot of the things that we do. The Apostle Peter in Acts chapter 3, preaching in the temple, the colonnade of Solomon, says that there will be times of refreshing from the Lord, but he also says there will be a time of restoration of all things. Restoration of all things. That's, I think, talking about the second coming. And that's a very hopeful idea, isn't it? That Jesus will restore everything that's worth restoring. And it made me think of a couple of verses I think I haven't fully understood before. In 1 Corinthians 15, after a very long exposition of what it means to have a resurrection body, Paul widens things out at the end. He says, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, for because you know your labour in the Lord is not in vain." So the idea there is that not only will we be resurrected, but there's a sense in which our work will in some way be preserved as well. It will have a value at least, or a presence in the future. What about this famous quotation that you'll often hear at a funeral from Revelation chapter 14 verse 3? "Then I heard a voice from heaven say, 'Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labour, for their deeds will follow them.'" Now, I used to think that just meant the reward for our deeds will follow us, but that's not what it's saying. Yes, they're blessed because they die in the Lord, because their deeds, their actions will follow them. Their actions will be resurrected with them in some way. So it is not only we who barely survive in the future, our works, it seems, may also survive. Now, obviously, we can see how that works with other people. If you invest your love, your prayers, your time in other people, if you testify to the Lord and witness to them, or if you build people up in their faith and encourage people to live Christianly, that investment certainly will be returned in the resurrection. But I think it's very, very general language. Other work, all the things that we might be working to grow or to develop, can be, if you like, restored or survive in some way. Our memories and our skills and our interests will be resurrected. Everything we've learnt will be resurrected. It means that the person who is good at working with wood will be resurrected with all that he's acquired and learnt about working with wood. And I'm sure there are many other examples where our work will survive with us. But it may even be more than that. The opportunity to work and to do good will be restored. And there's a picture in the Revelation of all the treasures of the earth being carried up Mount Zion into the city of God. All the treasures of the earth. That's in Revelation 20 or 21. And the idea there, I think, is that everything that's of value in this earth now will somehow be carried up into the city that is to come. Now, that means that anything that's really worth keeping from this world will survive. And it will survive not because it's intrinsically valuable, but because Jesus makes it survive. The Lord will restore everything that he wants to restore. So, work for the future. Work for the future because it's good for you. Work for the future because it will be good for the people who are alive when that future happens. But also work for the future because everything of real value will survive destruction. Everything that matters will survive death. In the resurrection, Jesus will restore all things. So work hopefully. Work for the future. Work for what is not yet but could be. That's my thought for today. Hopeful living involves working for the future. Well, goodbye. I'm going to read you just one verse from the end of Psalm 90. Psalm 90, which is about the frustrations of life mainly. But this is the last verse. May the favour of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. What a great prayer. God, establish the work of our hands as we live hopefully and work for the future. Bye for now.